So, what does integrity mean to you guys? Hi, I'm Natasha, and this is Laywoman's Opinion. And I just spent a week house sitting for my aunt. It was fun, and me and my sister took the chance to finally watch a show she's been wanting to watch for ages, which is Gargoyles. And if you've watched it, it was a huge hit with a small audience at the time it came out. It was kind of one of those 90s shows like X-Men or like the animated Batman series. It was very similar to those. Only it was a little more bizarre. It was also pretty dark, which I guess is kind of like the Batman show, at least. Maybe not as much like the X-Men one. Now, of course, I like all those shows, so I like the show okay. I'm not going to dwell too much on the plot of this show because that's not really the point. But personally, being the kind of person that I am, I always wonder what the message of a show is. And for this, finally, I don't remember what episode number it is. Maybe I'll put a note in if I find it, but otherwise, I'll just describe it to you. Goliath, the main gargoyle, is captured by this businessman. And I don't remember the full context, but he was framed or something for breaking something. I guess, though, perhaps he was partially at fault, but he refuses to admit it at first, and the businessman just holds him in captivity. Finally, at the end of the episode, Goliath admits that he was partly at fault, and to his surprise, he's then released. Usually that's not what happens when he has an encounter with humans, but it's what happened this time. And the businessman tells him that integrity is the most important thing in the world, and that's why he released him. And after that episode, it hit me that integrity was the overarching theme of the show. And given how rare that is, even in the 90s, it was somewhat rare, but it's definitely almost non-existent now, I thought that'd be a pretty cool topic for a video, so here I am talking to you about it. I'm going to give a few more examples from the show just because I feel like it illustrates the difference in people's integrity so well. But really my main point is integrity itself and what is it. So not too much more I think to say to introduce the topic. Let's just get into it. Okay, so the integrity of the characters in the show comes in a lot of different flavors, and they really relate to real life, I believe. So, first we have the good guys, which is the main gargoyles, and the awesome, empowered woman icon, Elisa Maza, who is one of the coolest characters I think I've ever seen in an old show. Girl is the whole package. And what I thought was so cool was from the very beginning, they introduced her and Goliath's special connection as to be based on integrity. The very first episode they meet, after he saves her, she finds out who he is, and they start discussing the world, and they both admit that they have a hard time trusting people because everyone is always backstabbing people, has betrayed them, and Goliath says he'll never trust a human again. And honestly, Elisa's I kind of get it, even though I am a human, but there's a lot of bad people out there, so she does not argue. But over the course of the next few episodes, Goliath actually does start to trust Lisa, because she proves that she actually does have integrity. She doesn't desert him. She protects him even when he's helpless. She does everything that honestly he has been missing, since his initial betrayal in the beginning of the show. And I thought that was so cool, because if you don't know this, they do kind of have a somewhat romantic connection as the show develops, and they both prove time and again that they are trustworthy to each other, and that's the basis of their connection. And Goliath actually has a history with a lover who betrayed him, who was a fellow gargoyle. So for him to see that a human who he viewed as betraying his entire race and hating his entire race for no reason in the past could actually be capable of this kind of integrity is a great turning point for his character. But it also shows the more powerful message that it doesn't really matter what you are, what kind of person you are, integrity can be found no matter what your background is. And Elisa's just a really great example of how that works both ways. So I really like that they showed that not only is integrity like not specific to one group of people, but they also showed how people who have integrity value other people with integrity, but they are hard to find. I mean, it literally took him 1,000 years to find somebody who matched his integrity level and who could hold him accountable. And as a single person who has struggled to find a match for the exact same reason, that was kind of relatable to me. I could like relate to Elisa a lot, being on the other side of that as well. Like, it's so hard to find a guy who matches your level of integrity if you have some. So being realistic about the struggles with relationships, thank you, show. Never thought a cartoon from the 90s would like actually do such a good job of that. Filling out like the hero side, good guy side, we actually see an example of childhood integrity as well, as we find out more about like the history of the Gargoyles. There was a young boy who promised to like take care of them, and he actually never wavered in that promise. He is our example of consistent integrity. Some people just that way when they're a kid and they grow up like into it. We see an example, perhaps more interestingly, of corrupted integrity, like the Gargoyles' guardian, I forget his name, the guy with the mustache, beard, betrays them, though he doesn't intend to betray them as much as he does, but he does betray them, and he ends up dying. Interestingly enough, later on there's an episode where Goliath meets his ghost, and his ghost wants revenge on Goliath and hates him, but Goliath ends up revealing through the course of the episode that it is actually himself who he hates. And once he realizes that, and that he simply couldn't forgive himself for betraying his friends, the Gargoyles, he helps Goliath instead and is finally released from the hatred that bound him and kept him from going on to the afterlife. And it was a very cool episode where the other guy he was with could not be that honest with himself and continues to come back for revenge in a later episode, but I'm not going to go into that. Very cool moment, the idea of losing your integrity but being able to find it again once you are honest with yourself. And that continues with the other good guys who have their weak moments, like Broadway, and over Goliath's like friend Gargoyles. What's the other one? The other B one. Well, no, not Bronx. The red one. It's slipping my mind. It's another New York name. But he gets almost led astray a couple times throughout the show and almost turns his back on his friends. But in the end, he comes back to them and reclaims his integrity, despite having a rather hot temper. And it's very cool. And they forgive him and realize that he simply just made his mistakes. And then there's Hudson, like Goliath's probably most steadfast, like second in command, who always stays true to his integrity as a soldier and never like wavers from it, no matter how many times like it costs him, and it even costs him an eye at one point. But he always stays on the straight and narrow and is a great mentor for Goliath, honestly. And it was really cool too to see that each generation was portrayed as having its integrity, like the older generation, the young up and coming generation, and then even the child generation, the other character who never breaks his promise to the Gargoyles, showing that some people, it doesn't really matter how old you are, like you can stay true to your values as you age. And if people don't choose to do that, that is their choice. It's not just because the world breaks them. Interestingly, quite literally, the Gargoyles are broken by the world sometimes when they're shattered into pieces, but the ones who remain because they stay true to themselves. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more in my next segment, talking about the villains. Okay, y'all know who I'm going to say first, right? So, Demona, probably the worst female character I've ever seen on one of these shows. That is saying a lot. She's awful. I doubt anybody liked her, honestly, by the end of the show. Unless they were an idiot. But the main reason you don't like Demona's interesting love also comes back to integrity, and I thought it was very brilliantly shown in the episode where they reveal that she was being used by these three like fairies. It's a long story. I'm not going to explain the whole thing. Go watch the show yourself if you want to know. Now, they did not make her do all the bad things she did. They were simply using her to continue with this side plan of their own. But so we see like the history of her life after she escaped the original genocide against her kind, and all the decisions she made, and some of them were bad and some of them were good. But the problem that she consistently has is that when it comes down to the most crucial moment, she can never let go of her bitterness enough to make the honorable choice. The choice with integrity, in other words. And because she constantly is like trying to get around, trying to take advantage, trying to go behind people's backs, because she can never bring herself to trust humans, she consistently gets her own kind destroyed because the humans then bite back after she does that. And there's this brilliant scene where the three fairies like ask her, but like, who like destroyed like this? Who betrayed like this human? Who like betrayed those people? Who lied about like this and got like the gargoyles killed? And even though we have seen through the whole like episode saga that it was her, she consistently says to each of those questions, it was this other person. It was this other person. It was humans. And we're actually shown in other episodes too, as she highlights all the bad things humans have done, that every time the other gargoyles confront her and say, but you did that too, or but you're the one who caused this because you like lied to us, she says, it's the humans and you don't understand. So by the end of the story, it very brilliantly like shows that Demona simply cannot take accountability for her actions. So she has to blame humans because she cannot accept that it was her fault that anything happened to her, even though time and again it was absolutely her fault. And even the ultimate humiliation she has of being turned into a human by day and a gargoyle by night isn't enough to break her and make her realize that she's the same person, human or gargoyle, which means that she has just as big a moral capacity for evil as the humans do, and in fact sometimes more of one. And she's so threatened by Elisa, partly because she knows Elisa, even as a human, is morally superior to her in every way and proves that she didn't have to be the way that she was. And because of her own choices, also loses her the love of Goliath, as he realizes that they were not on the same page. So she becomes very bitter, and but they do give her some slight redeeming quality by the end, where she's not willing to destroy the gargoyles completely, even so, though she's often willing to use them and kill at least some of them, but she doesn't want to wipe them completely out, and she reserves some mercy for her own daughter. But even then, she still lies and uses her and never really changes, you know. And they say about her, like, she always survives, which like sums up the thing. She always has to survive, even if it's the expense of like everyone else, and even if it means never admitting she makes mistakes. So even though she has a couple moments where you don't totally hate her, like overall she is a terrible person. And they show that the reason for that, like I said, is that she lacks integrity. It's a very fascinating thing. I think they were trying to make her kind of like Mystique from X-Men, but I actually like Mystique better. I know she's a bad person, but what I liked about Mystique from X-Men is that she at least could admit she was a bad person if you pushed her to admit it, and she genuinely like saw it, especially in that episode with Nightcrawler where he confronts her. She's overwhelmed by his goodness to the point where she cries and then like sacrifices herself for him, but in the end she runs away. But it's clear that she knows what she is, and she actually does in her final appearance try to do something to help save the world. Not in a very good way, but at least it shows she has somewhat tried to like realize that she was on the wrong path. Now of course in the comics she never stays on the right path, but I blame that to them switching authors so often and rebooting, and the movies totally like wrecked her character if you ask me. But at least initially Mystique had redeeming qualities, but what made her not as hateable, though she was still dislikable, was that she knew what she was, and there were times she could let go of her bitterness and genuinely actually wish her daughter Rogue or her son Kurt to be happy, even if it meant that they weren't with her. And it was rare, but she could do it. And that made you like her a little bit more and made you believe that maybe had the world been different, she could have been like a good, fulfilled person, but life was simply so cruel to her that it broke her and she never recovered. So she became a sympathetic character, whereas Demona is given multiple chances to be accepted both by humans and by other gargoyles and blows all of them herself. Same, you know, and again, I'm not saying Mystique's a good person, I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm saying that Mystique actually has more integrity than her, believe it or not, because at least she can be somewhat honest with herself. So yeah. Okay, I'll just hit a couple more here. So, you all probably figured I was going to talk about Xanatos, so let's just talk about him real quick. He's another example of a person who finds integrity through the integrity of others, somewhat like some of the other characters the Gargoyles influence over time. He's not alone in that, though. There's a couple more humans, the White Mage, I can't remember how to say his name, and the Princess, who also are that. Now, the White Mage and the Princess simply see the destruction that's unleashed by their actions, realize that it was going too far, and pledge to make amends. Xanatos is a little different. He consistently, makes horrible, terrible, decisions, and does horribly evil things throughout the show, and he never seems to really be lastingly sorry about it for most of it. He does have lines where, he'll object to, certain things being done, especially to people, but he'll consistently treat the Gargoyles like animals, basically not worthy of his consideration. Or he'll treat people who as objects to be stepped on, even if he feels somewhat more sorry for him than he does for the Gargoyles. However, over time, as the Gargoyles prove themselves to be capable of human emotions, he begins to change. He's the person who can change their mind if given enough incentive to, and though it takes a very long time, finally by the end of the show he drops his grudge against them and becomes a better person, especially as he now has a child to protect. And he realizes that he owes them and that there's no point being nasty to them anymore. And he also stops mostly his pursuit of other evil. Does he become a completely good person? No. Is he completely ethical? No. But he has reformed in that he has gained some integrity and realized that sometimes you just gotta keep your word to people, even if it goes against your goals. So people find him a more likable villain because he gained some integrity, and again, integrity is the cornerstone of it. But even before that, when he helped them, it was because he realized he had genuinely gone too far, and they gained some grudging respect for him. They were never really buddy-buddy, but they realized that out of the many villains they fought, he was one of the only ones who could be reasoned with. Then there's the character of Macbeth, who's more of a tragic character in all this, as he was mostly a good person, but thanks to being around Demona and linked to her, he became more like her over time. Now, by the end of the show, as far as I know, he somewhat still retains some of his honor, which is a good thing. It isn't completely ruined by his feud with her, but he has become bitter and disillusioned. You can't really blame him being chained to her for 1,000 years. We'll probably do that to most people. But so he's a person who they had integrity, they tried to keep it, and it got chipped away by the world, but maybe there's still some of that in them still. Another interesting example, the villain's side. And then there's the villains like the evil Dr. Severius, who I kept wanting to call Severus Snape because their name sounds so familiar, who have no integrity whatsoever. They just view people as animals. Tools, not even animals, and they have no morals. And he is one of the only truly, completely evil, non-redeemable villains in the entire, series. Him, and then there's, the mob bosses, and then the pack as well are pretty much just insane head cases. So it shows, how, again, there's different degrees of integrity and morality, even among bad guys. There's some who literally just act like beasts, and there's some who do treat everybody else like beasts because they care only about what they want, and there's some who can be reasoned with, but your odds are probably better at not trusting them 90% of the time. And then there's some who can finally realize their mistakes and live the rest of their lives to atone them. So, and then there's the Fae, which were a whole other brand of it, as just the people who view themselves as apart from everybody else and not bound to society's rules for that reason, but maybe also mostly try not to harm them. And there are human beings like that as well. I don't know, but they do actually show that they don't keep their promises, as they will make promises to the humans and then think that humans don't have any moral claim on them, so them keeping their promises just being nice. And there are people who think that way. Actually, these days a lot of people think that way. So there you have it. Gargoyles, a very rich example of integrity throughout all its characters. Now I've got to basically the end of this video, I just thought, honestly, this show came at an interesting time for me, as I've just been through several experiences myself where my own integrity was tested, and I questioned whether it was worth it. I'm not going to go into the whole story, but watching this show, I could relate to the characters and their struggles and wondering, is integrity ever rewarded? And I'd say, like, it's hard because as the show really depicts, more often than not, the world will never reward it. But I really like the conclusion that Goliath, the main character, and Elisa, the other main character, really both came to by the end of the story, which is that they are who they are because it is who they want to be. It is their personal value to be that way. I talked about this a bit on my old channel too, like on the levels of moral awareness, and the highest level of moral awareness, according to like this model that I was sharing, is doing something because it's the kind of person you wish to be. So, and Goliath says this repeatedly throughout the episode. He's like, gargoyles protect and defend. That is what we do. If we don't do it, we're empty inside. We have nothing left. Like, they can take everything else from us, like our home, you know, our families, like, you know, but this, like, who we are, like, we have to, like, stay true to that. I'm paraphrasing what he said, but that's basically something he says. And I can't think of a better way to sum up integrity, honestly. And these days, people don't, I mean, to be honest, I shouldn't say these days. People have, the general population of the world has always doubted whether integrity is really worth it to maintain. You know, many of us do what the characters do and give it up slowly over time, become so bitter against other people not having it that we choose to let go of it. And it seems like life just crushes it out of us. It takes a strong person to come to the conclusion that the gargoyles come to by the end and realize that integrity is not something somebody else can give you. It's not something that society can bestow on you. It's not something society reward you for. And actually, that's really because you cannot be rewarded for integrity in any, like, material way. Otherwise, it ceases to be integrity and simply becomes performance for, like, a reward. Integrity can only be integrity if you stay the same person no matter how you're treated. And if you can own up to your mistakes with the same, like, clarity that you can recognize other people's, and you can forgive them with the same grace that you want to be forgiven with yourself. That's what integrity means. And in that way, it will always go against the grind of the world, because the world simply cannot reward it. It cannot make it. It can't do anything. Because if it could, honestly, it wouldn't be our personal integrity anymore. It would just be a product of society. And that's why complying with societal standards is not viewed as integrity by any intelligent, like, moral philosopher. It is simply complying with the standards, and it may be a good thing to comply with society standards sometimes, but there's always going to be times where you have to go above and beyond that to really claim that you have integrity. And as the show depicts, integrity is its own reward. And that's all it ever can be. If you're religious, you may also believe that God will reward integrity, but you, like most even religious people who pursue this topic, come to the conclusion that God's reward for integrity is simply integrity itself. It's all over the Bible. Like, it's an old saying, virtue is its own reward. When you reach a state of moral enlightenment where you could say you are virtuous, you realize that you simply would not want to leave that state. So the state itself becomes the reward for trying to, like, achieve it. And I'd say in my own life I have found that to be true mostly. No matter how frustrating it can be to maintain a personal morality, like, in this world, I wouldn't change it. Because the idea of going back to the way I was before that just is not appealing. In fact, it's repulsive. That's all I got for you guys today. Leave any thoughts below if you watched the show and thought the same thing I did. Or I hope at least got you curious in it if you haven't watched it yet. Or just any thoughts on integrity that you have to add to this. Especially quotes. I'm always looking for more of those. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.